On your screens are images right now from Kharkiv in Ukraine, where you can see also you can see in fact that explosions are going off. Several residents, several reports have been coming in of many such explosions being reported in parts of Ukraine. So it definitely looks like at this point, Putin, Russia, has decided to go ahead with that military operation that they've referred to. Shiv, you were also talking about, the United States' role, or no role rather, in what's led to what's happening right now in Ukraine. It's the people of Ukraine who are going to be suffering the consequences of all that's played out in the last week and in the last 1 month or so. The fact that now you've got Biden putting out a statement saying that, look, we're going to assess, we're going to discuss what to do next, at a time when Putin has sounded off a very, very strong warning. He's spoken tough here. He said that I hope you hear me when I say to anyone considering interfering from the outside, you will face consequences greater than you have faced in history. So that's a very, very tough statement from Putin also that's come in. What will the United States do here, Shiv, beyond the sanctions, beyond, putting out these kind of statements? What can they do, realistically speaking, on the ground?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, Akshita. The United States has no shortage of resources in terms of, soldiers and materials, if it would want to actually send them in. The question is, would they even want to? My sense is definitely not. Remember what has just happened in Afghanistan just a few months ago, Akshita. The United States has virtually no appetite to enter another conflict of any kind. Certainly not at this time. Geopolitically speaking, strategically speaking, economically speaking, politically speaking, for the United States, plugging into another conflict at this time, especially one that involves Russia, is something that the United States probably doesn't want to, engage in. So the billion-dollar question really is, what kind of response will be there from the United States and NATO if the Russians actually attack? The sense on the ground is probably nothing more than, the continuing, pumping in of aircraft and material and war stores and military hardware that the Ukrainians have been asking for a very long time. But to paint you a picture, if people are imagining that it's going to be the Russians invading and then all of these countries sending their soldiers in to fight the Russians back, that is as unlikely a scenario as it is possible to imagine geopolitically, because all of these countries have their own problems. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that's NATO, is an intergovernmental military alliance, which basically, which literally necessitates one country helping another militarily, should it come under attack. But Ukraine is not yet a NATO member. It's an aspiring NATO member. It is this very membership that is the central piece in this entire conflict where Russia has become so belligerent. It is the membership of Ukraine that has led, this entire region up to this situation of war, where you've got Putin saying, since you guys have decided not to call off your aspirational membership to the NATO, we're going to continue with our plans and stop you from doing so. And like you rightly pointed out, Akshita, the messaging that he's put out saying, I hope the West is listening to me, don't mistake this for innuendo. I've taken all my decisions, and if you choose to intervene, the consequences will be historic. He also understands the implications and the metaphors of the Cold War, the huge devastation that has happened in this region from World War II, as Gaurav was telling us, right after the Cold War. So the tension is totally palpable right now. There's no exaggeration to say that the world is on the brink of war.
That will lead to an obvious question of whether Ukraine is a casualty, really, of the tensions between Russia and the United States. And all of this playing out in Ukraine right now. Geeta Mohan is also with us on this broadcast. Geeta, we're just putting out the statement that's come in from Joe Biden, also the US president, where he's saying very clearly at this point that this is an unprovoked and unjustified attack. He's saying we're going to be coordinating with our allies. There have been a lot of questions being asked of the United States. There are also a lot of questions being asked of countries like China, who've refused to condemn what Russia has done. The latest statement that's come in from the Chinese ambassador to the UN has said exercise restraint, avoid further escalation of tensions, no mention of Russia whatsoever.
Well, absolutely. Not just China, Akshita. India also has been very careful with its statement. In fact, this time around, the Indian envoy did not even mention Minsk agreements, very clearly saying that they need to ensure that all stakeholders' legitimate interests should be taken into account. Having said that, the concerns over here right now are for the people of Donbas region. The statement that has been put out by the President of the United States of America clearly states that there are concerns and worries for the people of Ukraine. So we do know that there is an offensive where Putin has announced that they are going to demilitarize Ukraine, but particularly we're talking about the Donbas region. And actually, I have been saying this. It is a strategic move by Putin, where he first announced independence of Donetsk and Luhansk, gauging what the international community, particularly the NATO and West, are going to really do. After which they saw economic sanctions yet again. And now they've gone further with the fact that Ukraine still continues to engage. We saw hectic negotiations and engagements by the Ukrainian administration at the United Nations and with the US administration. Foreign Minister of Ukraine is in New York and spoke at the UN, and Zelensky has been engaging the US. So the signs for Russia were clear that Ukraine is not going to back down on its move and forward movement towards joining the NATO, whatever the decision is, however long it takes. And therefore, the next step of action for Russia, that is military offensive in the name of demilitarizing areas, that is pushing back Ukrainian forces from the Donbas region, particularly from Donetsk and Luhansk, where they do have support on the ground. There are the majority of Donetsk and Luhansk, I'm not saying all of them, majority are pro-Russians and quite a few of them of Russian origin. Many, in fact, hold Russian passports. To that extent, we see Russia involved in this region. And therefore, when you see a pushback, a lot of reports on social media of how they've been hearing sounds of shelling all through. And what is going to happen is what every country is now looking at is the cost of human lives, the damage in the region, the destruction of property, the cost of rebuilding if that were to happen.
Okay.
So there is a lot at stake over here. And the question still remains, what is going to be the West's next course of action? Are we going to look at NATO and the United States of America, or for that matter, the entire West, coming together in a military offensive or a defensive action against Russia? Or are we only going to look at these statements that are coming in from the likes of President Biden and continued economic sanctions?
And that's what Shiv was pointing out, that perhaps militarily there won't be much that the United States or its allies will do. More sanctions, more tough talk is perhaps what you can expect from the United States as of now. But I just want to also play out exactly what Russian President Vladimir Putin has said. He didn't use the word war, but very clearly also made that statement that, yes, this is an invasion of Ukraine. Listen into exactly what Putin said.
We will not make such a mistake, such a blunder for a second time. We have no right to do it. Those who lay claims to world hegemony without any grounds call us, Russia, the enemy adversary, and they do have huge financial, scientific, military clout. We are aware of this. When we objectively assess the threats against us in the economy, we also assess our abilities and capabilities to withstand that blackmail, that sheer and ruthless blackmail. We are pretty realistic about those assessments. As for the military, even following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the loss of a lot of capacity, Russia is one of the most powerful nuclear countries around the world, and it has certain advantages in terms of some new innovative weapons. And in this regard, no one should have any doubts that any direct attack against Russia would lead to any dangerous circumstances for any potential aggressor and to their defeat. Military technology is evolving very fast. Now, if we allow any deployment of military systems, near our borders, well, these systems will stay there for decades, and they will create an absolutely unacceptable threat. As NATO is moving to the east, the security for Russia is getting more and more dangerous. And NATO has been saying that they need to bring its infrastructure to Russia as fast as possible.
So that is the statement from Putin, where he announced a special military operation. Again, a reminder for all of our viewers out there, India Today is the only channel reporting from the conflict zone. Gaurav Sawant is getting us non-stop reports from Donbas, eastern Ukraine, which is the area that Putin specifically mentioned in that address when he spoke about a special military operation. Now, also, Shiv, you know, the kind of reactions, I'd like to also introduce our defense editor, Abhishek Bhalla. Abhishek, before I come across to you, a quick question to Shiv, because, you know, at this point, everyone's tracking what's playing out in Ukraine right now. And considering that you have Russia involved, the United States putting out statements, NATO completely also watching what's happening, there are a lot of questions right now about what's playing out right now, whether this is World War III.
That's right, Akshita. You know, people have been talking about the possibility of a quote-unquote World War III for a while. You know, there are many reasons why that isn't an exaggeration, because, you know, the threads of what's happening right now between Russia and Ukraine emanate towards every other country. That's the reason why you see the United Nations at play. That's why you've seen India reacting. That's why you've seen, you know, China and all the other countries having a say in what's going on, because there are so many implications. Apart from global security, there is energy security, there is airspace, you know, there are other economic implications of what's going to happen. We've already seen the very damaging effects of what's going on stock exchanges here in India and elsewhere around the world. You know, the predictability of trade and business, you know, in what is an extremely important region for the world, because a lot of trade passes over, you know, this particular region. So the implications are enormous. It's not just about destabilizing security and things like that. There are real dollars and cents at stake, and that's really what moves countries at the end of the day. But in terms of World War III, the fact that all of this is happening in the shadow of you know, the Cold War, which has continued in some small ways ever since the Cold War sort of formally ended. It's happening in the shadow of what happened in Afghanistan, which is not very far away, you know, from Ukraine. It's happening in the shadow of the United States, you know, ratcheting up the kind of aggression and saying this will be a terrible mistake if Russia actually decides to declare war. So all eyes are now on all of these countries to say, you've talked the talk. Now Putin has declared war. Is this going to be another world war? Is it going to be another global conflict? And if push comes to shove, what will your country's role actually be? That's the big question right now.
The warning that's been shot off by Putin also has clearly said no outside interference. If you do, we will teach you a lesson that's harder than any that you've learned in history. And Abhishek, I want to focus on that. With things playing out as they are right now, and this invasion by Russia of Ukraine, militarily speaking, Ukraine doesn't stand a chance unless the likes of United States really decides to step in.
Well, and that's why it's important to note, you know, what kind of a military operation this is going to be, Akshita. Is it going to be a limited strike, perhaps in the eastern Ukraine region, as has been suggested by Russia till now? Russia has made it clear that they do not have any intentions to occupy Ukraine. But at the same time, you know, there is a stern warning, a word of caution for the Ukrainian soldiers. Russia has said that if soldiers want a safe exit, they can lay down their arms. So there's a clear message there that, you know, Ukrainian soldiers must surrender. Now, whether that happens or not is something we cannot predict. But as far as Russia is concerned, their aggressive posturing is very, very clear here that if there is resistance, it's quite likely that that there could be escalation. And if that escalation goes beyond eastern Ukraine, then, of course, there are huge ramifications. And, you know, those ramifications will go much beyond military concerns because there are other aspects involved as well. And it remains to be seen at that point of time whether other countries will come in to help Ukraine because Russia has also sounded a very stern warning that they do not expect any other country to interfere, because if that happens, consequences will be something that those countries have never thought of.
That's right. And at this point, remember that the UN Security Council is also holding an emergency meet, seeing what's playing out right now between Ukraine and Russia. The Russian representative there has, in fact, defended President Putin's call. Has said the special operation has been declared to protect the people of Ukraine who've been suffering for years. We aim to de-genocide Ukraine. And the decision has been made in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter. So, Geeta, while there's been a lot of talk about, how this is in violation of international guidelines, of international principles, Russia is maintaining that at this point they're doing what needs to be done to protect the people of Ukraine.